Bring in Miles Taylor, former Homeland Security Chief of Staff, Democratic strategist Jenna Arnold, and MS Now political analyst Alexi McCann. I mean, I'm still thinking it's extraordinary that had to be clarified. But Miles, you've got personal experience with being publicly threatened by the president. What emotions does this trigger for you? And what are these targets and their families going through right now?
Well, the threats are very, very real, Alex, and I'm certainly not comforted by the fact that the White House has walked it back from hanging these members of Congress to only putting them in prison. That doesn't give me a lot of comfort. And, you know, as I've said to folks before, when Donald Trump accuses someone of sedition and treason, even if he's not serious about those words, his supporters are serious about those words, and they make sure of it. They make sure to threaten you, to dox you, to put your family in danger. That's exactly what happened to us. And then the blast radius is often beyond just you yourself, and it becomes your family members and friends. I've had my wife threatened. I've had my 1-year-old daughter threatened because I simply exercised my First Amendment rights to speak out against this president. But Alex, this also leads me to the core of what these Democratic lawmakers were saying was not that that people in the military should disobey the lawful orders of the commander in chief. They should disobey the illegal orders. It's right. And it strikes me, Alex, that within 48 hours of Donald Trump first coming out and condemning them, a judge found those troop deployments in D.C. to be illegal. Military lawyers thought the boat strikes were illegal in the Caribbean. There was a probe into illegal mortgage inquiries in the Trump administration. A judge resumed probes of illegal ICE flights. And then to top it all off, a study showed that the Justice Department has illegally defied the courts 26 times in this administration. That's just a sample within 48 hours of the illegal things that this administration is requiring people to do.
Miles, I want to ask you about what you heard from Scott Bessent there, not far from the president's message. But first of all, what do you think of the original video? Should it have been produced? And second, Bessent's position may not surprise you, but how should GOP Congress members be reacting? Because some are not directly condemning his words.
Look, they should be condemning his words. And what I would say to the Treasury Secretary, if he wants sources of people who will say that Donald Trump has ordered them to do illegal things, all he needs to look at is his predecessors, the former White House Chief of Staff, Donald Trump's former Secretary of State, his former Secretary of Defense, his former Attorney General, his former National Security Advisor, his former Secretary of Homeland Security, his former White House Comms Director. I could go on. These are people who have publicly disclosed that Donald Trump asked them to do, at best, immoral things, and in many cases, things that would have been illegal if they had carried them forward. There is a long history. I would be very surprised if the Treasury Secretary himself hasn't been asked to do illegal things. So my concern is less so these Democratic members retracting the video. In fact, I think they should stand by the video. And it's more the threats of intimidation against whistleblowers in this administration, because we need people to come forward and expose wrongdoing and misconduct. And this administration has made it more dangerous. And so, Alex, it's why this week we responded at defiance.org with emergency grants to provide legal aid to whistleblowers who are willing to come forward and expose presidential misconduct.
So, Jenna, the president was rage posting about this overnight, and here's how he responded when a friendly Fox interviewer extended an off-ramp. Let's listen to it.
In the old days, if you said a thing like that, that was punishable by death.
Yeah, but you're not threatening them. A lot of people are interpreting there's a threat and there's security.
Well, I'm not threatening them, but I think they're in serious trouble. I would say they're in serious trouble. I'm not threatening death, but I think they're in serious trouble. In the old days, it was death.
How do you interpret that?
I'm as uncomfortable with it as you are, but I've been this uncomfortable with that man for 14 years, just like you. And what I see here is what Trump is really saying with these threats is that I'm scared you're not afraid of me anymore. And I do think what we all have to prepare for is that this is likely going to escalate, that this will continue to be his normalized strategy. As a former first grade teacher, the best job I have ever had, I have watched plenty of first grade bullies on the playground tell their peers that the only way that you can be protected is via me. And it's he or those bullies start to lose power when those other students realize that the best way that they can protect themselves is when they band together. And Trump is watching the courts say no. He's watching his military say that they can say no if something's unconstitutional. Communities are proving to him that they don't need him anymore. Lindsey Graham is turning on him. And this is, one of those, I continue to think, gosh, the last thrashes of a dying shark are always the strongest. And like, what are those going to be? But I still think we have a lot more coming. And this is why it's so important that we break the cycle, that any sort of strong man theory that a single man can protect us is outdated and wrong. And it's actually your community that's going to be in your best interest.
Alexi, I want you to weigh on this as well. In this regard, Trump cannot possibly know or not think that what he says doesn't have an effect like this. So this plausible deniability, like, no, I'm not calling for their execution, but they're going to be in trouble. I mean, he's got to know what happens to people.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And also, it's just interesting considering this is happening 3 months after the horrific murder of Charlie Kirk, which, as far as we know, was not totally politically motivated and was certainly not orchestrated by Democrats or Democrats' rhetoric. But after that, a lot of Republicans, including the president, said things to the effect of, well, Democrats and their rhetoric are leading to more political violence. They have been aware of how allegedly, they say, rhetoric leads to violence. And it is really striking to see the president retweeting these things or resharing these things, posting these things himself, walking it back halfway, kind of to your point, but sort of just leaving the larger threat hanging out in the air for his supporters to, interpret on their own. So it's almost as if he creates a permission structure for people to really just interpret those things and act on them or not, or take them to mean something that he says they don't. And it's really scary because, he has a huge platform and a lot of influence over how people feel. And people are already angry, polarized. They don't like members of Congress. They don't trust the government. They're conspiratorial. They don't need added flames to the fire that already exists for a lot of folks.
There wasn't a conversation I was actually involved in, but I overheard Steve Bannon refer to Epstein. I didn't have any idea who he was, frankly, at the time. This was not an issue on my watch.
What do you remember Steve Bannon saying?
Oh, I don't. I mean, I heard him mention the guy, and that was sort of the first time I'd really thought about him since the early 2000s when he'd been arrested, and there were issues about the sweetheart deal that he arranged through Acosta.
Ty, I want to ask you about kind of the bigger picture. Bloomberg has reporting that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche described a, quote, war against the federal judiciary. Well, he was speaking to a group of young conservatives, and others at the Justice Department have also described it as a war against judges. What's the implications of this? What does this mean for the judiciary moving forward, that the Justice Department is taking this hostile action and rhetoric?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me. I think that's one of the greatest threats to our democracy at this stage of the game. Keep in mind that Trump has neutered Congress. Actually, they've probably neutered themselves through their cowardice and greed. But they have, ceded basically all control to the president, and he dictates everything Mike Johnson does. So I think and that's tragic because the way the Constitution is designed, Congress, not the courts, were deemed to be the first wave of resistance to an evil president. Congress has greater powers than the president does under Article 1. President's Article 2 powers are enormous, but the Article 1 powers include impeachment, spending, war power, all those things. Basically, they have handed to Trump in a basket with a bow on it, which is dangerous. And the courts really are not designed. The courts don't have the ability to say what's best for America. They can't look at a case that way. They have to say what does the Constitution require, and the Constitution really is not adequate to deal with a president as evil as Trump is, somebody whose desire to accumulate and abuse power. And by denigrating the judiciary, Trump, is basically trying to weaken one of the only remaining pillar that is standing up to him.
Trump is absolutely devastated right now as his staff continue to revolt against him, rebel against him, leave him. You have staff, current and former. His staff are fighting. We've heard reports of Pam Bondi fighting with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino potentially. We have some elements of the Trump administration investigating others potentially. We have people in Trump world like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who Trump did not see as a colleague from a different branch of government, but he very much treated her and saw her as effectively one of his staffers that just so happened to be paid by you, the taxpayer. And she's gone. And you have these former Trump people coming out and saying that this man is dangerous. And he means what he says when he wants to kill his enemies. He means it. And so, like, these people know Trump well. These people have been inside the regime. Some of them back all the way back in the 2016 to 2020 period. And understood what Trump was and what he is and what he could be and has become, sadly, because he was given another chance to be president. And he has proven, myself and most of you watching, all of you watching, really, correct. Sadly, we were right. I never wished I was wronger than on this one, really, but we were right. And so this is wild to see. You don't see former Obama staffers. You don't see former Biden staffers. You don't see former Clinton and even former Bush staffers go into the media this consistently and frequently to say that the man I served under is a threat the way he is. Now, they probably should have done that with Bush, who is, I believe, a war criminal and should be in prison for his war crimes, at the very least. Right? But nonetheless, they didn't do it. With Trump, it's so bad, they can't avoid it.